Before we review your auto proposal, I thought it would be helpful to break down a sample proposal for you. Within your proposal, you're going to see terminology that may not make sense, dollar amounts that really come out of nowhere, and it helps to understand what those dollar amounts cover and what the terminology means. So let's start at the top, looking at bodily injury liability. This is a Safeco proposal. It is one of our preferred carriers, but we also have coverages from many other carriers such as Nationwide, Progressive, Travelers, etc. Your agent will help pick the best priced product and the best fit for you. So, if we're looking at bodily injury liability in a split limit capacity, so what that means is your liability is split between two buckets. You have the per person bucket and the per accident bucket. Let's say you're in a car accident and somebody is injured and they have $50,000 worth of medical expenses. You would have coverage because you have $100,000 per person, $300,000 per accident. But let's say that same accident was severe and somebody landed in the ICU for a week. Chances are they're going to spend more than $100,000 in medical expenses, in which case you would only have coverage for $100,000, regardless if nobody else was injured. And let's say the total was only $200,000. You are still short. We always recommend higher limits for this. These are just example limits here. But on your bodily injury, we recommend a minimum of 250,000, 500,000, and 250,000 in property damage. Again, your agent will help you make the right decision for what fits your situation. If we talk about property damage liability, this is the third number in the equation at 100,000 in this proposal, but again, this is customizable based on your needs. This would be the damage to others' vehicles that you caused. So let's say you're in a three-car pileup and you have a Suburban, a Tesla, and an Audi. Chances are you're going to spend more than $100,000 in property damage. Now, this is per accident, not per vehicle. So you have to keep that number in mind. Again, this is another reason why we recommend higher limits. We can also get an umbrella to raise those limits to $1 million or $2 million, depending on your personal situation. Personal injury protection is a dollar amount that'll cover injuries to you or a passenger involved in an accident, regardless of health insurance. So just keep that in mind. Typically, people will buy limits that are a little bit higher than this $2,500. And in some states, there's compulsory limits that make it different altogether. So if we move on to the next number, it's your uninsured, underinsured motorist bodily injury, often referred to as UNUM. So when you look at this number and you wonder 100,000, 300,000 in bodily injury, well, I already have bodily injury coverage up here. Well, you do, but you don't. So this is bodily injury to you if somebody injures you in an accident and they are underinsured or don't have insurance at all. In Minnesota, for example, 1 in 7 drivers don't have insurance. It's a bad ratio. So when you think about injuries and 100,000 and 300,000 split, if it is an uninsured situation, your insurance is going to brunt the cost of really all the medical expenses. If it is an underinsured situation, the second option here, and let's say the person that caused the injury had $50,000 in liability insurance and you have $100,000 worth of expenses. Well, in this particular instance, their insurance would pick up 50,000 and Safeco would pick up the other 50,000 and you would be within limits. But let's say you had $150,000 in medical expenses. Well, their insurance would pick up 50,000 and Safeco would pick up 100,000. Now let's say you had 200,000 in expenses. You would have $150,000 covered and the other 50,000 would be out of pocket. So it's important to remember how raising those limits really affect your coverage. So if we talk about uninsured and underinsured property damage, same principle as the property damage that you cause, except this is in reverse. So if somebody totals your $70,000 SUV and they don't have proper coverage, you would be protected in this instance. For most people, $100,000 is enough coverage, but if you have a really expensive or classic car, you want to make sure that you look at having underinsured and uninsured coverage that covers the cost of this specialty vehicle or expensive vehicle that you might have. So let's move on to your deductibles. You have two types of coverage here: comprehensive coverage and coverage for damage in a collision or an accident. So it's important to note that comprehensive coverage is going to be your fire, theft, wind, things like that that don't involve colliding with an object or another vehicle. So in this instance, would have a $500 deductible and full glass. And what full glass means is that you don't pay a deductible. This is the same across any policy that you purchase. If the insurer tells you you have full glass, that means there's no deductible on glass. So if you take a rock in the windshield and it shatters it, but nothing else in your vehicle was damaged, you might not want to pay a $500 deductible when the windshield might only be $300. So what this does is it allows you to still get service and have that windshield replaced or repaired with no deductible out of pocket. So when we move on to collision coverage, you have a deductible in this instance of $500. Again, your specific policy could be different. This would be if you hit somebody or somebody hits you or you hit an object and you need to repair your vehicle. This is what that coverage kicks in. Your deductible is applied and then the carrier fixes your vehicle. So then we look at loss of use. Don't confuse this with roadside assistance because they are a little bit different, a lot of bit different actually. So loss of use is just that. When your vehicle is out of service and you can't drive it for an accident, um, the carrier is going to pay for your rental car coverage. And this is $50 per day in this example. And then it's important to understand what limits are because every carrier has a limit on what they're willing to pay, and they're all different, and they're different by policy as well. And then roadside assistance, we highly recommend roadside assistance, but we actually recommend not getting roadside assistance on your insurance policy. And there's a couple good reasons. Let's say you have a lockout and it's a $75 service charge. The carrier will cover that, no deductible. However, it's also a claim on your insurance score, which could impact your rates in the future. So we actually sell a separate policy to cover these sorts of things. It is more expensive, but greatly enhanced. So when you think about AAA, for instance, roadside service, trip planning, things like that, um, that's all features that you don't get with the emergency assistance program with your auto insurance carrier. Comes at a little bit higher of a cost, like this is $16 a year, so it's really affordable. But enhanced roadside that we sell separate is right around $100 a year. So then if we look at other coverages that are important, such as drive other car, this particular policy is underlining insured. So you have coverage if you're driving somebody else's vehicles. A lot of times people don't realize that that's excluded from their policies, and state laws vary. In some states it's required, and you will always have this. And then you have discounts and breakdowns of your premiums. I hope this was helpful. I apologize for the noise in the background. I am working from home and my dog can be a little bit wild if you happen to hear that. So if you have questions, be sure to ask your agent. Anybody in the agency that is licensed can answer your questions. And all the best wishes, and I look forward to speaking with you in the future.